So today what we're going to be working on is multiplying square roots. So I would like you to put me on pause and do the try this. So the try this is multiplying. Remember, when you multiply same bases, you do add the exponents. Okay, so come back and check your answers. All right, so number one, we have 3x times 7x squared. So remember, when we multiply monomials, you multiply the coefficients. So 3 times 7 is 21. And then we have x, which is x to the first, times x to the second. Remember, same base, you add the exponents. So that's x to the third. So it's 21x to the third. All right, number two, we are distributing. Same thing. When we multiply the coefficients. When we multiply same base, you add the exponents. So we have negative 5 times 3 is negative 15. X to the second times x to the fourth is x to the sixth. Remember, add the exponents when we multiply. Remember, when you have an x and there's nothing written in front of it, no number, it's really a 1. So it's negative 5 times negative 1 is positive 5. And x to the second times x to the fifth is x to the seventh. And let's take a look at number 3, multiplying two binomials together. All right, so we have 2x times 6x to the second, that's 12x to the third. 2x times negative 1y to the second is negative 2y to the second. And I need an x in there also. So it would be 2xy squared. And then we have 3y times 6x squared is positive 18x squared y. If you put y, x squared, same thing, no big deal. And then we have 3 times negative 1y squared. 3y times negative 1y squared is negative 3y to the third. So working with radicals, it's pretty much the same thing, okay? We do have to make sure, though, when we're multiplying square roots, that you do have the same radical, meaning square roots multiply square roots, cube roots multiply cube roots, a fourth root will multiply fourth root. You can't mix roots. You can't have a square root. You can't have like the square root of 6 times the cube root of 8. That you can't do, okay? You can't mix the roots up. So you have to have the same root. All right, so then we're going to multiply the coefficients. Remember, that's the number in front of the radical. Then we're going to multiply the radicands. That's the number under the radical. And then you're going to simplify in the end. This way we can see if we can combine like terms or anything like that. All right, let's take a look at the first one. We have 4 the square root of 2 times 5 the square root of 6. So we're going to multiply 4 times 5. Those are the coefficients. And we get 20. And then we have the square root of 2 times the square root of 6 is the square root. So notice I said square root, right? Square roots will give you another square root of 12. Now we can simplify this. So what perfect square, the largest perfect square that goes into 12 is 4 times 3. Don't forget to bring down the 20. So it's 20 times the square root of 4 is 2, and then we have the square root of 3. And 20 times 2 is 40, so my answer is 40, the square root of 3. All right, let's take a look at number 2. So I see here 2 the square root of 3 times the square root of 3. Now remember, there's no number written in front of that radical, so that's really a 1 in front of that radical. So if you need to write it, then write it. So now multiply the coefficients. 2 times 1 is 2. And then we have the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 9. And the square root of 9, that's a perfect square. The square root of 9 is 3. So it's 2 times 3, which is 6. Now notice, and this will always happen, anytime you take a square root, like the square root of 3, and multiply it by itself, the square root of 3, you will always get a perfect square. And then the square root of that number will always be whatever number's under the square root. So for instance, if you have the square root of 4 times the square root of 4, well, that's the square root of 16, which is 4. And the square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is the square root of 25, which is 5. So then I know the square root of 27 times the square root of 27 is going to be 27. Okay, so just a little side note there. All right, number 3, we are distributing. Same thing. Multiply the coefficients, multiply the radicands, sorry. Remember, there's really a 1 in front of here because I see that negative square root of 2. So it's negative 1, the square root of 2. Okay, so we're ready to distribute. 2 times 1 is negative 1 is negative 2. The square root of 5 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 10. 2 times 3 is 6. And the square root of 5 times the square root of 8 is the square root of 40. Now we're going to simplify the square root of 40. We cannot simplify the square root of 10. There's no perfect square that goes into 10. All right, so what perfect square goes into 40? That is 4 times 10. So we have 6 times 2, that's the square root of 4. So that's 12, the square root of 10. Bring down the minus, the negative 2, the square root of 10. So we have negative 2, the square root of 10, plus 12, the square root of 10. Remember, we just did this the other day. When we add, you have to have the same radicands, and we do. So I know my answer is going to have a square root of 10. And then we take the coefficients here. So we have negative 2 plus 12 is positive 10. So my answer is 10, the square root of 10. All right, let's take a look at number 4. Okay, we are double distributing the binomials here, same thing as before. Okay, so we're going to multiply, let's start with 5 times 3 here is 15. 5 times the square root of 6 is positive 5, the square root of 6. 2 the square root of 6 times 3 is 6, the square root of 6. And 2 the square root of 6 times the square root of 6 is 2 the square root of 36. Now, the square root of 36, that's a perfect square. That's actually 2 times 6, and that's 12. Okay, and then these we can combine. 5 the square root of 6 plus 6 the square root of 6 is 11 the square root of 6. And then we have that 15. Now we can combine 15 and 12. So 15 times 12 is 27. So it's 27 plus 11, the square root of 6. Okay, so let's take a look at number 5. All right, so we're distributing negative the square root of 10. So we have negative the square root of 10 times 2 the square root of 2. That would be negative 2 the square root of 20. And negative 10, negative the square root of 10 times 5 the square root of 5 is negative 5 the square root of 50. So we're going to simplify. All right, so what perfect square goes into 20 is 4, and that's times 5. Bring down that negative 2. So we have negative 2 times, the square root of 4 is 2, so I have negative 4 the square root of 5. What perfect square goes into 50? Well, that's 25 times 2. So it's square root of 25 times the square root of 2. So we have negative 5 times 5. The square root of 25 is 5. So it's minus 25, the square root of 2. So we cannot combine these. These are not like terms. One's the square root of 5, one's the square root of 2. So we cannot add them or subtract them. So it just stays like that. Okay, so let's take a look at the last problem, number 6. Let me just get rid of this here. All right, so I'm squaring a binomial. So remember, that does not mean to take the 2 and distribute it on the inside. It means to multiply by itself. So we're going to do 5 minus 4, the square root of 5, times 5 minus 4, the square root of 5. Now we're going to double distribute. 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times negative 4, the square root of 5 is negative 20, the square root of 5. Negative 4, the square root of 5 times 5, again, is negative 20, the square root of 5. Negative 4, the square root of 5 times negative 4, the square root of 5 is positive 16, the square root of 25. Okay, now we need to clean this up here. So in the middle, I can combine like terms because they both have a square root of 5. So negative 20 minus 20 is negative 40, the square root of 5. Keep the radical. Right here we have 16 times the square root of 25 is 5. So that's actually 16 times 5 is 80. So now I can combine 80 and 25. That is 105. And then we have minus 40, the square root of 5. Okay, so that's it, and we'll practice in class tomorrow. Everyone have a good day.